Blog Talk Radio.
The Chiamo Afurakanu Afuraitkaitnut Neye AMANSEM Da Medinde Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Akan Aquamumain Maruka Etipi Mu Odwiraman Mu. Greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is AMANSEM Day, Affairs of the Nation Day. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Akan. Odwirafo of the Aquamu Nation in North America within Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, Afuraitkaini people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you once again for tuning into the broadcast. We are opening up the chat room right now. If you have any questions or comments and you'd like to interact in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, simply hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. For those who are new to the broadcast, we have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akanto Nananom, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion, where we, on Joda Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akan expression of Nananom Ancestral Religion. First and foremost, because we are Akan. Secondly, because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akan Ancestral Religion and culture and cosmology, ritual practice, not only for individuals in the Western Hemisphere, but also from those individuals in Afuraitkaitnut, Africa, who have been infected with pseudo-religion, such as Christianity and Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and white culture in general. Thus, their presentation of ancestral religion, Akan ancestral religion, has been infected, so we deal with ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion on Joda Monday nights, dealing with our ancestral origins in ancient Kanat, the Kan land, which is a title of ancient Nubia. Our people migrated from that area over 2,000 years ago, reestablished ourselves in the western part of the continent, reestablished the Kanat Empire, the Empire of Ghana. 1,000 years later, some of our people migrated further south towards the savanna and forest belt regions, reestablished Akana civilization in the regions of contemporary Ivory Coast and Ghana. Hundreds of years later, some of our people were forced from those regions into North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo Kessie, the Great Diversity, the enslavement era. However, we maintained our ancestral religious traditions, and thus the Akan tradition was preserved as Winti in Suriname and South America from the Akan term Quinti. Akan ancestral religion was preserved as Obia in Jamaica from the Akan term Obai. Akan ancestral religion was preserved as Hoodoo in North America from the Akan term Undu, meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life. It also means to become heavy with the spirit, through spirit possession, spirit communication, and so forth. And those terms also can be found in the language of ancient Kanit and Kemet, ancient Nubia and Egypt. Undu meaning root, plant, medicine from roots, trees, plant life, and so forth. It also means to become heavy with the spirit. It also means the offerings given to the deities, the Undu, the offerings, the Hoodoo, and so forth. So we deal with that kind of information on Akanto Nananom, ancient authentic Akan ancestral religion, on Joda Monday nights. On Abinada Tuesday nights, we have Ojira, which means purification. We deal with not just the Akan expression of ancestral religion, Nananom, but the ancestral religion in general. No matter where Afuraitkaini people, African black people find ourselves in the world, ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives. So we deal with that purification of concepts, purification of cosmology, culture, and so forth. Ancestral religion is defined in essence of the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, these are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. we state that Ojira purification operationalizes Nananom. Purification operationalizes our practice of ritually incorporating divine law and ritually restoring divine balance. As we seek to execute our divine function in creation as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, and align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day, which is our culture, our way of life, the divine acceptance, the law, the love of order, and the divine rejection, the hatred of disorder and its purveyors. When we make legitimate mistakes, then we engage the ritual process to ritually incorporate law and ritually restore balance so that we can realign our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order so we can continue to execute our function harmoniously in creation. Thus, ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives. So we deal with that purification of concepts, culture, cosmology, as we have preserved our ancestral religious practices through our spirit genetic blood circles, even into the Western Hemisphere, empowered and guided by our ancestresses and ancestors and the deities that govern us, that we incarnate with. We were able to wage war against the white male's offspring with metal armaments as well as chemical and biological warfare, root work being the precedent established through Hoodoo and Juju and Voodoo and Wanga and Gengain and so forth, Grigri. We utilize our ancestral religious practices to free ourselves from enslavement and force the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere through spirit genetically, transcarnationally inherited ancestral religious practice. So that's what we deal with on Joda or on Benada, Abenada Tuesday nights. On our Wukuda, Akwada Wednesday nights, we have Egua Marketplace, where we showcase Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut businesses, organizations, and institutions, those who are serving the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut community in a positive capacity, those who are informed by their ancestral religious practices as they serve the community in a holistic fashion. We, through our Okom economic development model, an approach to economic development which is holistic because it's rooted in our ancestral religious values, that model directs us to starve the beast and feed the pride, to redirect funds that we would have potentially wasted with the white and their offspring throughout the course of a week, and redirect those funds to the business, organization, or institution of the week for optimal capital infusion. We're taking thousands of dollars we would have given to white businesses and direct them to the business of the week so that business can immediately hire within the black community, permanently expand their products and services to us. It's just a win-win situation. If we do not starve the beast and feed the pride, reallocate our funds away from the white businesses and direct them to the business of the week, then we are by default leaving those funds in the hands of our enemies, the whites and their offspring, and by default we are financing our own oppression. Our sister Afia Asase Gretuo, owner of Hoodoo Pharmacy and Conjure Culture and Couture, she came onto the show last night, the Egua Marketplace show. Her business, Hoodoo Pharmacy, as well as Conjure Culture and Couture, that is the business of the week. So please check out that broadcast and patronize or matronize our sister. This is the business of the week. When we direct $10 away from the white and their offspring, starve the beast and feed the pride, and direct that to the business of the week, that's an infusion of $10 into the accounts of a black business, away from a white business. When 1,000 of our people engage that process in the course of 7 days, and that's a $10,000 infusion of capital into a black business, taking that $10,000 away from white businesses and financing them and their families, and redirecting that $10,000 to a black business, which will allow her to hire permanently and immediately from within the community full-time employees so they can begin to work immediately, expand the products and services to us so she can serve us at a greater capacity. That's a win-win situation. So tonight is AMANSEM Affairs of the Nation, where we deal with specific issues confronting our people as an Oman, as a nation, specifically Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in the Western Hemisphere. The term Odwira means purification in the language of ancient Kanit and Kemet, so-called Nubian Egypt. Also in the Akan language, Jira means purification. It also means to celebrate a ceremony of purification. Oman means nation. It also means the West, the land of the setting sun. So we designate ourselves as Odwiraman, the Purified Nation of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in the West, the land of the setting sun, the Western Hemisphere. All Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, African black people in the Western Hemisphere, those of us who are descendant from our ancestresses and ancestors who were forced into the Western Hemisphere during the Kwesi, the great perversity of the enslavement era, but we maintained our ancestral religious practices built upon that foundation to wage war against the whites and their offspring and force the end of enslavement in the West. We are Odwiraman, the Purified Nation in the Western Hemisphere. And we have specific issues that confront us because we know the nature of an Oman, a nation, is a living, breathing entity, just like an organ within your body is a living, breathing entity. The cells are children of that organal structure. So they interface with one another harmoniously, but at the same time, they are serving the parent organ of which they are a component part, because we recognize that organ is governed by specific forces in creation, specific Abosom, specific Orisha, Voodoo, and so forth. The cells are serving the parent organ, but they're living in harmony with the divine force that governs that organal structure. A nation, an Oman, is a living, breathing entity. We are cells within that organal structure. That organal structure is governed by specific forces in nature. When we serve those forces in creation, we're serving that organal structure, that nation. So when we're drawn together by the ancestresses and ancestors, our Nananom Nsamanfo, in the specific region of the Western Hemisphere, in this region of the Earth Mother's body, we're directed by them to coalesce and blend ancestral blood circles to bring ancestresses and ancestors back into the world. When we interface with the unique expression of the forces in nature in this region of the Earth Mother's body, when we interface with the Earth Mother divinities in this region of their body, and so forth, interface with the plant life, animal life, and mineral life in this region of the Earth Mother's body, which is unique for food as well as medicine. That confluence of events has allowed us to forge a locative identity rooted in our location in this region of the Earth Mother's body and so forth, and our interface with the nature of the divinities and their unique expressions, as well as our blending of ancestral blood circles. We have forged a unique identity. We have a unique expression of ancestral culture, ancestral religious practice, and a unique expression and dealing with our issues, a unique approach to our issues. We come from an Amanne perspective, a nationist perspective. We deal with Amanne nationism, the purification of nationalism. We don't deal with secular nationalism. We deal with Amanne. We deal with nationism. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, nationism. The purification of nationalism and a holistic approach to nation building rooted in the proper understanding of what an Oman, a nation, is. So we have specific issues that we want to deal with tonight. The topic for tonight, we say Arit Heru, healing through trial in the context of Amanne nationism. We published a very short document, a one-page document, Arit Healing, dealing with the restoration of the Eye of Heru in the context, tonight in the context of Amanne nationism, the purification of nationalism. So when you look at that document, we'll go over that document and we'll show also in the context of manhood and womanhood, Afurakani manhood, Afuraitkaitnut womanhood, how that trial through healing, that healing trial and so forth, how it directly relates to nation building. So that Arit Healing document, we'll put the link in the chat room. Right quick. And this is something that we just recently published a couple of weeks ago. Okay, so we'll go through that first, and then we will show the context. So what we say in the document, you see an image of, on top, on the right side, you see Het Heru. On the left side, you see an image of the deity Heru in the form of his sacred Achineboa, the falcon, the Eye of Heru, and then you see that Eye of Heru being given an offering to the aims to the king in the form of Alsar. So, and then beneath that you see, once again, the Eye of Heru flanked by Nekabet and Wachet. They're called Abba and Ya in the Akan tradition. Next to that, you see Tahuti and Anan, and you'll see that the Anan, the sacred Achinebois, is a monkey. He's proffering the Eye of Heru to Tahuti. That Eye of Heru, in this context, is a divinatory instrument, an instrument of oracular divination. And we did a broadcast specifically on that. So the document says, in our ancestral culture and cosmology, in ancient KA-KAIT and Kemet, Nubia and Egypt, the battle of Heru and Set led to Set gouging out Heru's eye. Tahuti, the male Abosom, deity of divine wisdom, as well as Het Heru, the female Abosom of fertility, reproduction, procreative activity, and beauty, worked to heal the Eye of Heru. Eye of Heru became a talisman of healing and protection from that point forward. In Afuraitkaitnut, Africa, from ancient times to the present, the trial of the healer and healeress often begins with tragedy. That initiatory tragedy provokes their healing capacity. Once overcoming their trial, the healer and healeress then step forward to transform the community for generations to come through healing. The most powerful healers and healeresses in the world are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African black ancestresses and ancestors, as well as those of today, had their healing capacities forged within the cauldron of trial to emerge as the fulcrum, the equilibrating force within our community. This includes those who carried this healing capacity in their spirit genetic blood circles into the Western Hemisphere during the enslavement era, utilizing our ritual practices to sustain our people, overcome our enemies, and force the end of enslavement in the West, our greatest trial. The greatest healers and healeresses on earth are born of these ancestral clans. And of course, we are descendant of these ancestral clans. When we talk about the trial of the healer and the healeress, often beginning with tragedy, you'll see stories dealing with the Abosom, dealing with the Orisha, the Voodoo, and so forth. Someone becomes, quote-unquote, deathly ill. They go through a number of different trials and so forth, but then they invoke the Abosom, invoke the Orisha, invoke the Voodoo, and so forth, learn the specific medicine, how to communicate with the spirits of plant life and mineral life and animal life and so forth, how to communicate with them, learn the properties of plant life, animal life, and mineral life directly from the spiritual forces that animate the physical vessels of plant life, animal life, and mineral life and so forth, learn those properties, and then they heal themselves. And once they have that experience of healing themselves and repairing themselves and so forth, now they've gone through that initiatory trial and they have the capacity and the responsibility to heal those in the community. First, they go through the experience. They learn from the experience, the suffering, the trial that forges that kind of strength and tenacity. And then they move forward, as well as wisdom, and they move forward to heal the community. They have that capacity and responsibility. They were born to heal. They were born healers, born healeresses. They came into the womb with that responsibility, with that divine function. It's like every cell in your body, every organ, gland, system has a specific function to execute, even as stem cells are fashioning and birthing these organs and cells and glands into the full-fledged organs and cells and glands that they will be. They have that function written into their nature. Same is true with regard to us, pre-incarnation, as ancestresses and ancestors. Before you entered into your mother's womb, you were an ancestor or an ancestress. You were given a specific function to execute by the Supreme Being. That function was written into your krawa, your soul, your divine consciousness, the divinity, the force of nature dwelling in your head region. And then you were sent into the womb. You're born into the world. You're born into a certain kinds of circumstances based on a number of different karmic relationships that you develop intergenerationally and transcarnationally and so forth. You come into a specific branch of your family, and no matter what challenges you have, you still have that specific function to execute. Sometimes we come in contact and run into what we considered to be conflict, pain, suffering, and so forth. But within that pain and suffering, we have the capacity, we have the opportunity to extract that kind of knowledge, that healing capacity. And then once we have that experience, once we engage that process, then we are placed on the path to heal those in our family and in our community, our Oman. So that's on an individual level, and then a familial level, and a communal level, a national level with regard to Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, nationhood, and so forth. But that, of course, is also from one Afurakani clan to another with regard to nation building, restoration. So when we're talking about the Eye of Heru being gouged out, and then Tehuti, the force of divine wisdom, and Het Heru, the force of divine beauty, they come together to heal the Eye of Heru. So that wisdom capacity, and of course the divinity of divine beauty, Het Heru. When we talk about beauty, talked about previously, she is the force in nature that fuses together complementary opposites in a harmonious fashion for conception so that things can be birthed. They talk about Het Heru as the force in nature governing beauty, but beauty is an expression of harmony. Harmony is the revelation of divine order. If you would ask someone, show me a picture of order, someone couldn't show you a picture of order. However, if they show you someone or something that is beautiful, that is a manifestation of order, because beauty expresses harmony, and harmony is a manifestation of divine order. So when you see authentic beauty, you see things working in a harmonious fashion, where there's organs working together in a harmonious fashion, the trillions of cells working together in a harmonious fashion. That is a manifestation of beauty. That's order manifest. That's the complementary fusion of complementary opposites in a harmonious fashion, manifesting divine order. So when you have the force in nature that manifests divine order, expresses divine harmony through beauty, what you're showing is a force in nature that fuses together that which will create harmony in the world. So she comes together, she sees disorder, and through the force of her power and energy and consciousness, she can bring order to disorder through fusion of complementary opposites, helping to heal the Eye of Heru. And Tehuti, with that divine wisdom, has the capacity to bring healing to that Eye of Heru. So Tehuti and Het Heru working together, healing the Eye of Heru. Now let's look at the eye, and let's look at this notion of the eye and insight and so forth. So we're going to go into our text, OBAATAN, Afuraitkaitnut Womanhood, as well as OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood. In the specific section, in the 5th section, both books, and both of them are dealing with the same concept, but in the 5th section of each book, we deal with the 7 sections of each book. Each book has, each section deals with the principal value of manhood and womanhood. Each one of the 7 sections are governed by the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which govern the 7-day week. And those solar, lunar, and planetary bodies are governed by specific Abosom forces in nature that govern all natural cycles in creation. So in the 5th section, the planetary power is Yao, as well as Ya and Abba. We're talking about Heru, Wachet, and Nekabet. And they're called Yao, Ya, and Abba in the Akan tradition. They're called Shango, Oya, and Oba in the Yoruba tradition. They're called Hebioso and Avejida and Ayaba in Vodun. But we're going to go to that section because we're dealing here with insight and talking about manhood and womanhood on that individual level. So let's go to the OBARIMA book, and you'll see the link in fact, let's place the link in the chat room real quick. For that, you can go to either page. So the OBARIMA page, you can download the ebook version for free of all of our books, as a matter of fact. And we're putting both pages in the chat room right now. OBARIMA page and OBAATAN page. We're going through this chapter because it's dealing with this force in nature focus on Heru as well as Wachet and Nekabet, but also because of this notion of proper insight. The fifth principal value of OBARIMA, Afurakani manhood, is insight, exercise proper insight in order to make proper judgments in life and achieve individual manhood. Then we're going to go to the OBAATAN section, and of course these principles are fundamentally twin principles, slight variations based on the energy complex. The fifth principal value of OBAATAN, Afuraitkaitnut womanhood, you'll see this on page 37 of the OBAATAN book, directs us to transform your inner vision in order to make proper judgments in life and achieve individual womanhood. In the manhood book, same principle with a slight variation, insight, exercise proper insight in order to make proper judgments in life and achieve individual manhood. So whether it's manhood or womanhood, we're transforming that inner vision so we can exercise proper insight so we can make proper judgments in life. This is on an individual level, but also in the context of Odwiraman, the Purified Nation, when we're talking about nation building, transformation. So first we address the fact this is the fifth principal value of manhood and womanhood. So we address what we talked about in the previous four principal values. So we say when an Afurakani male, and in this context when an Afuraitkaitnit female as well, both recognizes Inyame wa Inyame and Sheshe divine order, which manifests throughout creation as the balance of male and female. When he or she establishes that balance in every aspect of their existence, when once established the divine balance within self, within home, within relationships, within family, within circle, then we arm ourselves to defend that order and balance with our lives. When we continuously engage the process of respecting or reviewing every thought, intention, and action, and harmonizing each with divine order. And when we talk about respect being that fourth principal value, respect or spectate means to view. So when we say respect, we're talking about reviewing. To respect or review every thought, intention, and action, and harmonize each with divine order, then you have a proper decision-making process that we lay out in that fourth principal value. Once you've gone through those four principal values, then the Afurakani male and Afuraitkaitnit female is then poised to cross the threshold of OBARIMA, Afurakani manhood, OBAATAN, Afuraitkaitnit womanhood, on an individual level. The tools that we have so far developed, and we're talking about those first four principal values leading up to crossing into the threshold of individual manhood, individual womanhood, the tools so far developed and internalized are necessary and sufficient for the individual, the man or woman, to survive and thrive within any situation or condition wherein he or she finds him or herself at any moment in time. At the same time, new situations and problems will confront him or her and his or her people that have no precedent, and old situations, problems which have never been addressed sufficiently nor resolved will resurface. As life advances, we move into different cycles that are governed by different configurations of forces. These different cycles require that we utilize our thoughts, intentions, and actions in new but proper ways to confront and overcome the new obstacles. These different cycles also provide us an opportunity to resolve problems with a rejuvenated spirit that were left unresolved by previous generations. We're engaged in that process now. Things that were unresolved in previous generations, it is incumbent upon us, it is imperative as Afurakani men, Afuraitkaitnit women, that we resolve the issues that were left unresolved by previous generations. We're moving into a different cycle, and we move into these different cycles. We have an opportunity to resolve these problems with a rejuvenated spirit. And that rejuvenated spirit is in the context for us as Odwiraman, the purified, which includes rejuvenated Oman nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. This is why we're moving in that new direction, but that old direction. We're talking about Amanne, Nationism, the purification of nationalism. Secular nationalism, messianic nationalism, and amorphous nationalism without any cultural grounding has never worked for our people in the past 100 years, and it never will, because it was doomed from the start based on an unfounded foundation. It didn't have a real foundation because it was rooted in Eurocentric ideas, sometimes dressed in Afrocentric jargon, but the foundation, the philosophical foundation, came from the whites and their offspring. The messianic nationalists, the secular nationalists, when you have pseudo-religion, even if it's blackened up, trying to blacken up Jesus or Muhammad or these other fictional cartoon characters that never existed, and using Judeo-Christian Islamic approaches as a foundation for messianic nationalism to lead the people to the promised land, it was doomed from the beginning. When you have secular nationalism rooted in atheism and you have no moral foundation because you don't understand how the forces in nature sustain creation and also sustain our communities and sustain our physical bodies, sustain our families, sustain our communities, then you do not have a foundation. When you have an amorphous nationalism like an amoeba with no finely demarcated lines of identity and so forth, and you just pull in all kinds of things and ideas and beliefs and so forth, just trying to throw anything at the wall to make it stick because you have no moral foundation, you don't have no identity, because you don't have any clan affiliation, because you don't know who you are spiritually, you don't know what your function in creation is, you don't even know that you have a function. Your nationalism is doomed from the start. And of course, we have true stories to bear that out. Over the past 100 years, we're no closer to independence, sovereignty, and security in that sovereignty on our own land. We're no closer to that today than we were 100 years ago. Not close, not even moving in that direction. So we're using a rejuvenated spirit. We're in a new cycle, returning to our ancestral culture, the religious moral foundation rooted in the sound understanding of divine order and how we fit into divine order, and how nation building, restoration, revolution, resolution fits into that context. So this is a rejuvenated spirit. So that these different cycles, as we say, also provide us an opportunity to resolve problems with a rejuvenated spirit that were left unresolved by previous generations. This is what Amanne Nationism is. This is why we have our Nationism Odwiraman Afashe, which is our Odwiraman conference, which is focused on nationism, the purification of nationalism, and its implementation. That's in June. This year will be our third annual Odwiraman Afashe Odwiraman conference, the Purified Nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in the Western Hemisphere. We come together dealing with the 7 principal values of nation building, restoration, methods of food production, preservation, methods of curing disease, establishing a military structure, establishing institutions, training and culture, and so forth, establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence rooted in our ancestral cultural foundation, building of homes on acquired land, and the manufacturing of clothing, dealing with textiles and so forth. These 7 principal values of nation building, which are animated by the forces in nature that govern the 7 solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week, that govern all natural cycles in creation. They also govern our natural operation with regard to one another, establishing order and preserving order, establishing sovereignty, restoring sovereignty, preserving sovereignty, and so forth. This is rejuvenated spirit, moving forward. So, the Afurakani OBARIMA, man, Afuraitkaitnit, OBAATAN, woman, is thus one who exercises proper insight in order to make proper judgments in life. Then we cross into the threshold, or over the threshold, of OBARIMA, manhood, OBAATAN, womanhood, when we recognize that exercising proper insight allows us to participate in the process of setting the precedents for overcoming new obstacles and bringing resolution to those problems which have been left unanswered. In order to exercise proper insight, that eye that had been ripped out by Set must be restored by Tahuti, the male force of divine wisdom, and ARIT HERU, the force of divine beauty and creativity, the manifestation of divine order. So we give an example. One may contract a disease and use his knowledge and awareness to reestablish balance, health to his body. He draws on the knowledge he has gained and the precedents that have been set to effect the cure. He may cure others as well with a time-tested method. However, one may move into a new environment and come into contact with toxins that have never been encountered before. There is no precedent set for establishing the cure for the new disease patterns that develop. The Afurakani OBARIMA man, the Afuraitkaitnit OBAATAN woman must be able to confront the new challenge and overcome it. We must exercise proper insight, transform our inner vision in order to make proper judgment. This means that in order to be OBARIMA man, OBAATAN woman, the Afurakani male, Afuraitkaitnit female must invoke his and her intuition, his and her insight, which is rooted in our Okra, the soul, the divine consciousness, which is the drop from the ocean of divine consciousness of the Supreme Being, Amanne and Amen, the great mother and great father, Nyamewa, Nyame. When the Afurakani male and Afuraitkaitnit female invokes their NHOMA, their insight, the eye of the Okra, the eye of the soul, he or she recognizes the manner in which he or she must apply his or her intelligence gathering process to confront and overcome new challenges that will confront us as a people. So the way that we confront new challenges, we moved into the Western Hemisphere. We came in contact with plant life, animal life, and mineral life, some of which we never came in contact with before. When we escaped from plantations, we don't know what animals are out there. There's certain animals we had never seen. We'd never seen certain kinds of bears, of course. There are no black bears and so forth in West Afuraitkaitnut. There are no possums in West Afuraitkaitnut or Central. There are many animals we never saw. We never came in contact with snow. We're not used to, if we were brought here during the summertime, it felt the same as it did when we were living on the continent. And all of a sudden, in a few months, something happened that we never experienced before in our lives. It began to get cold, and then white stuff is falling on the ground, and we're freezing and shaking and so forth. How do we function in this new environment? We escape from a plantation. How do we function if we get sick or the children get sick when we've escaped to this new settlement, this maroon settlement, and a child gets sick? How do you heal them? You're away from the plantation. You have to be able to pick the herbs, plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth, using these things for food as well as medicine to preserve yourself, to heal yourself, to feed yourself, and so forth, the community, so that you can preserve that independent settlement you just established after you escaped from enslavement and killed some crackers and built your own settlement. How do you confront these new challenges? How do you defend yourself from animals? How do you defend yourself from these pseudo-Native Americans, these migrant Asians who invaded this hemisphere, who may try to attack your new settlement as well? You have attacks coming from them on one side, attacks coming from their white Eurasian brothers on the other side. How do you confront these new obstacles and maintain? Our people did that. Attuning to the Okra, the soul, the divine consciousness, divinity dwelling in the head region, using our proper insight, which is the eye of the Okra, the eye of the KA-KAIT, the eye of the soul, communicating with that divinity dwelling in the head region, drawing down the direct energy and knowledge of the function you are to execute in creation. When you're tuned to that divinity, then you can go into nature, those who have that specific relationship, and could communicate with the spirits of plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth, understand and learn their properties, and learn which plants to pick, which minerals to procure from the earth, and so forth, in order to heal specific ailments. What time of the year, what time of the day, what time of the night to pick these plants, how to prepare them, and so forth, to heal specific ailments. We did that. We've continued to do that. Just like George Washington Carver, who we call Nananom Nsamanfo, stated that he would go out into nature early in the morning, communicate with the plant life and so forth, learn their properties directly from them, the spirits of plant life, and then come back into the lab and reproduce and replicate what he learned from the spirits of plant life and so forth, like our sister Ama Asase Ajay of Asase Heals, who's spoken at our Hoodoo Mind festivals, all three of our Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation festivals and so forth, where she creates her tinctures, her medicines. She goes out into nature, learns directly from the spirits of plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth, but specifically plant life and mineral life, to procure the proper plants and minerals to put together those healing tinctures for our people. So we have that capacity. We can overcome new obstacles because we are tuned to the divinity that governs us. We're guided by our ancestresses and ancestors. They direct us towards proper insight, and we utilize that proper insight to overcome new challenges that confront us. We did that in the past. We are descended from those who have done that. We have that capacity written into our nature. But first, we must heal that eye that has been gouged out, blinded by the enemy. We are tuned to Tahuti, tuned to ARIT HERU, restoring that wisdom and insight, that luminous capacity to see in darkness, healing that blindness and so forth, and attuning to that manifestation of order, which is harmony, expressed through beauty, attuning to ARIT HERU so we can see what is orderly, see what is harmonious, and also see that which is disharmonious and avoid that, and only embrace and be drawn to that which is harmonious. We say the Afurakani OBARIMA, Afuraitkaitnut OBAATAN must also invoke NHOMA insight in order to resolve problems that have been left unresolved in our Oman. These problems that have kept us stagnant, ill, self-destructive, and dependent. The invocation of NHOMA, which is the Akan term for insight, is an act of independence, of maturity, for it establishes for the Afurakani male and Afuraitkaitnut female the reality that his consciousness or her consciousness is directly connected to the divine consciousness of Nyamewa, Amanne, and Amen, the great mother and great father, supreme being. This means that there is no problem that cannot be solved. There is no obstacle that cannot be overcome. As Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, we have the capacity to see the consequences of misguided ideas and change course. Number one, before we create a major problem or exacerbate an existing one. And number two, after we have found ourselves in a negative situation and are seeking a way out. Through proper insight, we can be preemptive. We can see what's coming around the corner and so forth. But then we can also and avoid negative consequences. But if we miss that, we also have the capacity, once we find ourselves in a negative situation, to use our insight to make proper judgments so that we can extract ourselves and get back in harmony with order. We say that NHOMA, or insight, once that Eye of Heru is healed, that insight gives us the capacity to, quote-unquote, rescue ourselves before something negative has a chance to take shape. We give an example. One can have an intuition about walking down a certain block at a certain time. The intuition directs him to change course and take a different path to his destination. Later that evening, the individual learns that there was a fatal shooting on the block that he was directed by his NHOMA, his insight, not to walk down. That insight being derived from the Okra, the soul, the divine consciousness, the deity dwelling in the head region. Such an example demonstrates that the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut individual has the responsibility to awaken his or her NHOMA or insight. Insight is an act of maturity. It is an obligation. Just like you develop your physical body through strength training and so forth, it is your obligation to develop your NHOMA, your insight. The whites and offspring promote this idea that insight is nonsense, it's just fictional belief, superstition, and all this. We have a direct relationship through our KA-KAIT, the soul, the divinity dwelling in the head region, that divinity directly to the Ka and KAIT, the great Ka and KAIT, the soul of the supreme being. So we have a direct connection to that reservoir of divine wisdom and consciousness, a direct line to that takes up residence in our own soul, in our own head. We have the responsibility to access that, activate it through our insight, and then utilize it. That's why we say it is incumbent upon the Afurakani male and Afuraitkaitnut female to be able to perceive the dangers around the corner, large and small, physically, emotionally, culturally, politically, economically, spiritually, and take preventative measures. In the same fashion, the Afurakani OBARIMA and Afuraitkaitnut, OBAATAN, male and female, must be able to invoke his or her NHOMA insight when others in the community have failed to do so. When societal problems plague the community and the community has not moved to solve the problems, it is incumbent upon the mature Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut to engage in intervention to invoke their NHOMA insight in order to perceive the underlying causes of the problems and eradicate them completely, finally restoring balance to our lives. We use that divine insight, the eye of the okra, the eye of the okrawa, the eye of the soul, for preventative measures and for intervention measures. We talk about Ohu, or knowledge, perception, and NHOMA, which is derived from Ohu, knowledge, perception. They are messengers of Nokwade, messengers of truth. It is our adherence to Nokwade, to truth, through NHOMA, through insight, that will solve our inherited, present, and future potential problems. For NHOMA, or insight, attunes us to the reality of Maranechi, divine law, love, and divine hate, the two poles of divine order. Through divine law or love and divine hate, we learn who and what to accept, meaning who or what to be in love with, because law and love is the same word. Who should we be in law with or in love with in a proper interaction? And who and what to hate, to reject, to repel. Just like your respiratory system draws in nutrients, oxygen, and so forth, your circulatory system draws in these nutrients and so forth through food and so forth, but your immune and lymphatic system understands what should we hate, what should we repel, what should we reject, what should we expel from the body, what bacteria and so forth should we expel, what living entities that are seeking to consume and destroy us should we expel. What do we accept? What do we reject? What do we consume? What do we eliminate? What do we inhale? What do we exhale, and so forth? What do we expand with? What do we contract with? NHOMA, or proper insight, leads to proper judgment. The Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut individual recognizes the reality that judgment is wise. Only misjudgment is unwise. Proper judgment is a hallmark of maturity. The whites and their offspring want us to say judgment is wrong, or we shouldn't judge anything. You should be judging everything, everyone, every situation at all times. If you're not exercising judgment, proper assessment of thoughts, intentions, actions, ideas, events, circumstances, and so forth, you're a child. You assess every situation and make proper judgments so you can make proper decisions. The manner in which you make decisions directs and informs the manifestation of what's going to happen in your life. If you make foolish judgments, you're going to create suffering for yourself. If you make proper judgments, you're going to create abundance and harmony for yourself. The perversion or suppression of NHOMA, or insight, sets us up to be dominated by perverse views, beliefs of our enemies. When we lack NHOMA, insight, or vision, we lose direction. We then make misjudgments. This is blindness in the true sense. The whites and their offspring understood this reality, therefore moved to blind us to Nokwade, to truth. This resulted in the misdirection of the immature amongst us generation after generation. The greatest means by which we have been misdirected into blindness is via the corruption by the whites and their offspring of our Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, or African ancestral religion. So they understand that blindness is a perversion. Darkness is natural, but blindness is a perversion. We use darkness to rejuvenate ourselves. We go to sleep in the darkness. It transforms the secretion of hormones and so forth, release of melatonin for regeneration and assimilation and so forth. Then the light comes, serotonin is kicked in. Those hormones make us more expressive and outgoing and so forth. Darkness is natural. It's part of a natural cycle, but blindness is a perversion. When you are infused with falsehoods, leading you to make foolish judgments, misjudgments, which creates disorder in your life, that's when you're being set up to be controlled, being self-destructive, and that self-destruction is fueled and refueled by misjudgments, which is fueled by misinformation, falsehoods. But when you embrace Nokwade, when you embrace truth, empowers you. Your insight is a messenger of truth. Your knowledge, your Ohu, is a messenger of Nokwade, of truth. Then you make proper judgments. And when you make proper judgments, the direction of your life changes. When we embrace truth, because we're attuning to the Okra, the soul, the divine consciousness, then of course that Eye of Heru has been healed because we invoked Tahuti and Heru, wisdom and beauty, the manifestation of order. Now we can see that eye is radiant. We can see missteps. We can see around the corner. We can see what has been done, what's proper, what's intelligent, what's revolutionary, what's resolutionary, and what is self-destructive. We can overcome new obstacles, and we can look back and resolve those unresolved issues that have been plaguing us and keeping us stagnant for generations. This is part of this process of Amanne Nationism, the purification of nationalism. But it starts off very often with that trial. And we talked about that trial for the healer and healeress, but on a greater level, on a macro level, that trial for us, lack of insight. So we're warring against other, nation against nation, sometimes clan against clan, empire building and so forth. On the continent of Afuraitkaitnut, the whites in our spring are watching one group fight another group, even internal strife, even civil war, and then they arm both sides of the conflict, or they join on to one side to try to assist them to defeat the other side, and the prisoners of war are purchased by the whites in our spring, and then we end up in the Western Hemisphere. And once we end up in the Western Hemisphere, then we see what that blindness led us to. Instead of fighting each other, we should have been exterminating the whites in our spring. It's a misnomer that the whites in our spring have been controlling our people for hundreds of years. The whites in our spring didn't begin to colonize West Africa and Central Africa until the late 1800s, 1880s, and so forth. They showed up in the so-called 1400s. They didn't begin that colonization with the Berlin Conference until the late 1880s. Enslavement was already over. So they were not ruling Afuraitkaitnut for 400 years, as is often misrepresented, because of the Bible and all that other nonsense. Our people didn't begin to lose to the whites in our spring until the late, quote-unquote, 19th century, early 20th century, and then by the mid-1950s and so forth, we began to liberate ourselves politically, starting not with Ghana in 57, but with Sudan in 1952. That was the first nation to liberate themselves, and then Ghana in 57 and so forth. So the political liberation was not followed by economic liberation because we weren't grounded in our ancestral religious traditions. Many of our people are still practicing Christianity and Islam and all this other nonsense, and it's creating all kinds of self-destructive refueling of misguided thoughts, intentions, actions, judgments, and so forth. As our people begin to recognize these obstacles, seeing that these things have been unresolved in the past, they're going to move forward with a rejuvenated spirit, just as we're doing here in the Western Hemisphere. We're recognizing that we achieved political liberation, meaning we freed ourselves from enslavement, and those ancestresses and ancestors who affected that, they did their job establishing independent maroon settlements, independent black towns, and so forth. But then some of our people in the early so-called 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century began to embrace white culture, leaving our ancestral religious practices alone, which placed us in harmony with order every moment of every day, seeing what's true, clear vision, and then we began embracing these fake religions, fictional cartoon characters who never existed: Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Buddha, Brahman, and so forth. And then we began to make misjudgments, and we've been self-destructive ever since. So now we're getting back on track with reality. When you return to reality, to Nokwade, to truth, you return to the order that undergirds creation. Ancestral religion places us in harmony with order. The ritual incorporation of divine law, the ritual restoration of divine balance, we attune to the forces in nature that actually regulate all of creation, that undergird the order that governs all of creation. They are the embodiments of divine order in creation. When we get possessed by the deities, the forces in nature, we're being possessed by the forces that manifest and regulate and embody order in creation. Then our thoughts become ordered, Our decisions become ordered. We recognize who we need to connect with. We recognize our enemy, the whites and their offspring, and then we seek to eradicate them, reestablish order, and so forth. So we get into that information in the book, but that's the key. OBARIMA, Afurakani manhood, OBAATAN, Afuraitkaitnut womanhood. When we're talking about achieving individual manhood, individual womanhood, it is rooted in exercising proper insight, transforming your inner vision to make proper judgments in life. We've gone through that trial as a group, being sold off to the whites and their offspring, going through the middle passage, the Musu Kessie, the great perversity, the enslavement era, going through that trial, ending up in the Western Hemisphere, some of our people being breeded and so forth, the strongest ones being breeded, the strongest males, the strongest females being breeded. But of course, at the same time, while they were trying to create the strongest, breeds to work hard in the fields and so forth, they were also breeding a superhuman Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut group of the strongest elements. And of course, we rose up, waged war against the whites and offspring, and forced the end of enslavement. So now we build on that precedent that was established by those who are actually successful. Success in the Western Hemisphere, if you're enslaved, is to free yourself from enslavement. That's success. To establish your own independent nation settlement and defend that throughout the course of your life and intergenerationally. That's success. Our people did that within their lifetimes, inclusive of, for example, Dismal Swamp, where over a couple of thousand of our people were living intergenerationally in a free, independent territory. When the whites and offspring sought to drag them back into slavery, we waged war because we had a militia fighting against the whites and their offspring, forcing them not only into defeat, but the whites and their offspring began to try to trade with us because they knew that was a free, sovereign territory. Our people completed that in their lifetimes. Our people waging the Hoodoo wars and Gullah wars and so forth forced the Civil War to come into being. Our people flooded that endeavor as well and forced the end of enslavement and turned the tide and forced the end of enslavement through our fighting. And then we began the independent black town movement for decades, establishing independent settlements, building on our own. So our ancestresses and ancestors, if you're during slavery, success means you free yourself from slavery and establish independence. Our people did that. The next phase was to end the institution of enslavement for the entire continent. Our people forced that to happen. The next step, when enslavement is over, and they're forcing some of our people into sharecropping and just another form of feudalism and neo-enslavement and so forth, the intelligence amongst us began to establish their own independent towns and become nation builders once again. Our people did that, even leading up into the early 1900s and so forth. Now we are their descendants. We are to pick up where they left off. We follow that track, that path of those who are actually successful. We don't follow the integrationists who are unsuccessful. We don't follow the secular nationalists who were somewhat separatist, who were also unsuccessful. We follow those who followed ancestral religious practices and actually were successful in their lifetimes, freed themselves, established sovereignty, and defended their sovereignty intergeneration. That's the path we follow. Those who follow ancestral religious practices, that's the path we follow. We went through this trial, but then we became healers, healeresses, through maintaining our ancestral religious practices, and we utilized that judgment, that insight we received from the restoration of the Eye of Heru to heal our people, heal our community, and move forward in a successful fashion. We build upon that precedent that was established in that fashion. So now, that's the information we wanted to get to. Of course, on this broadcast, the AMANSEM broadcast, this is our short broadcast, our weekly broadcast dealing with a specific topic. It's a 1-hour broadcast. The other broadcast, a 2-hour broadcast. That's the information we wanted to go over. We want to also say that this notion of OBARIMA, Afurakani manhood, OBAATAN, Afuraitkaitnut womanhood, the foundation of sound relationships, Those sound relationships and marriages are the foundation of strong families. Strong families are the foundation of a strong Oman nation, and that strong Oman nation basis the foundation from which we launch Nyansa wisdom or resolutionary action and endeavors for nationism. So we had our retreat in South Carolina a couple of weeks ago, the Happy Merit Retreat, where we dealt with OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood, OBAATAN, Afurakani Womanhood. We had our workshops for the males, workshops for the females, men and women, going through the book, the training and so forth, the books for both manhood and womanhood and so forth. We also had our Patasasatim training in our joint sessions and so forth. We also engaged in the ancestral religious process, ritual process. It was a great event. People went back to their locales and so forth to take this training to the community. Of course, our OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood, and OBAATAN, Afurakani Womanhood books, as well as the Patasasatim book and the Mate book, are all free downloads from our website. So people are empowered to go out and bring this information to the community wherever they are. We're having a second retreat on Memorial Day weekend in Treme, New Orleans. Myself, along with Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau, we're having our KA-KAIT, the Soul of Hoodoo and Voodoo retreat on that weekend. Once again, we'll be dealing with OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood, OBAATAN, Afurakani Womanhood, Patasasatim, as well as manhood and womanhood in the context of ancestral religion, building those strong bonds and so forth, which not only heal ourselves, but also the foundation for revolution and resolutionary action for nation building and restoration. If you would like to register, we have some spaces left. We only have 25 spaces open. We have had a number of people register so far. So those registrations, those spaces are first come, first served. If you would like to attend that event, the May event, go to our KA-KAIT page on our website, Odwirafo.com, KA-KAIT, Hoodoo and Voodoo page, and so forth, and you can reserve your space. We have a few spaces left. And yet I'll say to those who have reserved spaces so far. We have a question in the chat room. Hold on one second. Let me pull this up. You mentioned reincarnation briefly a few moments ago. I'm curious, if someone has not produced any offspring before they die, is it possible for them to reincarnate through the bloodline of other families? Yes. So we did a broadcast called Bebrasem, the ramifications of reincarnation. We went into some detail about that, but yes, you're accurate in that regard. So if we do reincarnate through our blood circle. But sometimes when people don't have children, the question is that the end of the line because you have no descendants to reincarnate through a couple of hundred years later because you didn't produce any offspring? But you have to consider, how did you get here? Because you were an ancestor, an ancestress, and you came through your mother's womb. So when you look back, you have 2 parents, you have 4 grandparents, you have 8 great-grandparents, you have 16 great-great-grandparents, 32 great-great-great-grandparents, 64 great-great-great-great, and then you have, 128 and 256, 512, 1,024. So even if you get back to that 1,024 line of great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, now you have 1,024 branches that you can possibly come through. You came through one of those 1,024 branches and ended up. So if you didn't have any offspring, you make transition, you're an ancestor and ancestress, you go back to the ancestor realm, you still have one of those other 1,024 branches, so you may come through, that cousin branch and so forth, that, you as an ancestor and you had a sister and their descendants generation after generation after generation after generation produce offspring, you may come through that specific branch and so forth. So there are a number of branches that we can come through, but they're closely related. But we do detail that in the Bebrasem, the ramifications of reincarnation broadcast. We're going to take one call on the phone line, and then we have to end the broadcast here. Michelle on the phone line, number 3667. You had a question or comment?
Yes. Good evening.
What's up?
My question is, it has to deal with, I guess, the way that society is. I mean, it's a lot of alcohol, of course, and a lot of drug use. And, you know, growing up, I guess you could say I was around a lot of it. So, and like through experiences with people who deal with those things, I could say that, you know, sometimes it seems like when they speak or when they act, it's mixed messages. Like it's, I mean, I when I listen to you and I understand what you're saying about discarnate spirits and things like that, I could understand how, like, sometimes when they would communicate, it would be, you know, certain things that would be said, and it's like, where did that come from, you know? And then it's like, but also at the same time, they tell the truth about certain things, or they, I guess you could say, open up about certain things that they, I guess, wouldn't open up about just naturally, or it's harder for them to open up just in regular life. So my question is about that, like, how do you distinguish between, like, what is actual and factual and what's not, or do you just throw it all away when conversations, because, I mean, it's like, especially with young people, it's kind of almost rare that you will find anybody who is not under some type of influence.
Right. So now, are you talking about in the context of people you come in contact with, family members and other people on a regular basis, or as well as ancestresses and ancestors?
Mainly just like immediate family. Like a lot of people in my family are like that. So it's kind of like, you know, I come into contact with other people, of course, you know, through work and, you know, just being out and about. But when I'm having to deal with my family, because I have children and just different things like that, that's kind of what I have to deal with, in a way.
Right. So, and the fact is, oh no, go ahead.
So I would, you know, so I'm just, in a way, I'm wondering, you know, was it something that we used to do? Was there any type of times where we drank alcohol, or because I've seen other cultures where they smoke certain herbs and things like that, and maybe we just distorted it or abused it to a point where it got out of order, or was it never that?
Okay. So, well, first and foremost, the reason that we're drinking alcohol and smoking and things like that, those are simply chemical and biological weapons of warfare. So when crackers talk about they're looking in Syria for chemical weapons and so forth, crackers have been dropping chemical and biological weapons of warfare in our communities, bombs, you know, taking out hundreds of thousands of people for years, you know, through these weapons. That's all that they are. Sure. That's not part of our process to engage in, you know, inebriation, getting high and so forth. Yeah, you see some other, you know, non-black cultures, including pseudo-Native Americans, which are, you know, just Asians who invaded this hemisphere. They're not indigenous to this hemisphere. They're just invaders. They're not our brothers and sisters either. They're just Asians. Right. So they're Eastern Eurasians, just like Europeans are Western Eurasians. So both of them invaded this hemisphere. But that's what they do, because they're controlled by lust and everything else. That's not our process. When we want to attune to the forces in nature that govern us and our ancestresses and ancestors, we don't engage in inebriation. That begins to block your receptivity and distort your receptivity and makes you open to the influences of the kind of discarnate spirits that are wayward and uncultivated. So that's the only reason the White Narrow Spring began to promote drug use amongst our people, because it's a way to control our minds and make us self-destructive. And our people fell into that nonsense. When you look at ancestral religion, we're the original religious conservatives. You look at ancient Kemet and, KA-KAIT and with various traditions, Voodoo, and, we have, very purifying and purificatory practices. We're always focused on living in harmony with divine order, aligning every thought, intention, and action with order. Some of our people fall off of that, controlled by lust, controlled by misguided desire, controlled by misinformation and so forth. And like you said, some people will be, say certain things that are intelligent, some people are not. Even in the extreme, if you saw somebody hooked on crack cocaine, that distorts their mind. It doesn't mean that every experience they ever had since they were a child, they didn't forget all of that. So they can tell you something even in the midst of a, high, something, a crack high, that's something that happened when they were 15 and how they avoided certain negative circumstances, or you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that because it's going to cause you problems, because they've had that experience, but they're also destroying themselves and making bad decisions at the same time. So, it can be mixed.
Yeah.
So we don't follow, number one, uncultivated individuals. It's not their role or responsibility, and they do not have the capacity to give us proper direction. In our community, traditionally, you have honored elders and honored elderesses, and those are the people in our content, Nananom Nsamanfo. Those are the individuals who have demonstrated consistently that they lived in harmony with order on a consistent basis, and they have elevated to that point where they have the responsibility and the capacity to guide us throughout the course of our lives. Now, many of us in our various families, because of Christianity and, white culture, we don't have that large class of cultivated elders and elderesses because many of them have fallen into the nonsense. But you may have one or two, but then you may not. But then at the same time, not only do you have physical elders and elderesses, but when they make their transition, they become spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestresses. And we call them Nananom Nsamanfo in our con, and every group has their own name for them. That's the class of ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated. And they have increased power and responsibility to, assist us during the course of our lives. Whereas other people who transition, they may have been nice people, whatever, but they didn't live in harmony with order, so they were kind of controlled by lust and vices, and they made their transition. They're trying to still develop themselves in the ancestral realm. They're still cultivating themselves and trying to improve themselves. And they can do that, that's fine, but we don't follow their direction. We follow specifically the class of Nananom Nsamanfo, spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, and we have some from our blood circle who are assigned to us pre-incarnation, even before we enter to the womb, and they're the ones that guide us throughout the course of our lives. Nyamewa, Nyamewa, Mawu and Lisa, the Supreme Being, they direct specific ancestors and ancestresses from our clans that were spiritually cultivated to assist us in the course of our lives. And when we pour libation, we call on the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors to assist us. The other ones may show up at a ritual or, a ritual song, ritual dance every now and then, or in a dream to give you some kind of, inspiration or something. But when you're looking for direction on life issues and what direction you need to take, you don't go to them for direction. You go to the specific class of spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. If you had a class of spiritually cultivated elders and elderesses in your living family, they would be the ones you go to. You don't go to the people who are half in, half out, sometimes make good decisions, sometimes make foolish decisions. You may interface with them and see them at a family reunion and hang out or something, but when you need answers to proper direction life issues, you only go to the cultivated ones. If you don't have cultivated ones in the family, which many people don't, we have to spend more time with the cultivated ancestresses and ancestors than normally we would have. Normally we would split the time. We would split the time between the living elders and elderesses, getting direction from them, and then sometimes we would get the direction from the cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. Because of our situation, many of us don't have those living elders and elderesses because they're all caught up. So we have to spend more time in other groups of our people on the continent, for example, but then some of them are caught up as well. But we have to spend more time with the ancestresses and ancestors who are cultivated, but that's fine because we get the culture direct, uncut, pure, and, we move forward in that fashion. So even when pouring libation or sitting at the shrine and communicating, even in the language, there's a difference for saying, for example, Nsamanfo, just regular people who made the transition. Nananom Nsamanfo are the spiritually cultivated class of ancestresses and ancestors. And when we say that, those are the only ones that can respond. But even if you don't know the language and you just focus and project, I'm seeking to only attune to those who are spiritually cultivated, and I'm moving back from the ones who are not. The spiritually cultivated grandmothers and grandfathers in your family, those are the ones who respond and come forward, and they will hold back the other ones and their other little mixed opinions away so you can only, engage the spiritually cultivated ones. So that's how we operate. That's how we move forward with that. And we did a broadcast called NHOMA, Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation. That's on YouTube, and then in that broadcast we go over our documents dealing with ancestral communication. So we go into detail about that question.
Okay. Well, I think that's what I needed to know. So I appreciate it. May I say?
Okay. May I say we appreciate the call. So those are very important questions. Those are fundamental questions about, the mechanics, the dynamics of the relationship of those different classes of ancestresses and ancestors and how they assist us. Because sometimes people just say, hey, I'm praying to the ancestors. First of all, we have ancestresses and ancestors as a balance, just like there are goddesses and gods and the great god and the great goddess and so forth. So we always recognize that balance, whether we're using English or we use, our ancestral languages. But just not anybody who just makes their transition, not just anybody. We have specific classes, and we are assigned to the specific class of spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors who guide us throughout the course of our lives. And they simply direct us towards what our own KA-KAIT, the soul dwelling in our head regions, is seeking to pull us towards, because they recognize that function, and they assist us to align with our own soul, with the divinity within. If we can't attune to that divinity, then they show us, listen, this is what your Ka is trying to direct you to do. This is the way you need to do that so you can make proper judgments and have a more harmonious life. So, but yes, we get into that detail. So again, for those who would like to attend that conference or the retreat, 2-day retreat in Treme in New Orleans, the KA-KAIT, which is, of course, the male and female terms for soul, divine consciousness, the soul of Hoodoo and Voodoo retreat. We'll be going through this information in detail. Go to the KA-KAIT page on our website. I'll put the link in the chat room real quick. You can sign up. We're anticipating, simply because of two factors. The two factors are, on one hand, we just had the retreat in South Carolina on Editsville Island. We put the video out and so forth. People were very empowered by the retreat, and people have seen, what was going on. Some people were not able to make the retreat. We had some people who initially signed up, but they weren't able to make it, so they're going to come to the retreat in New Orleans. Then we've had people who have seen the information for the first time, acclimated themselves to some of the, free downloads and so forth, and they're very interested in the retreat as well. They've seen the video and seen responses and so forth. So that's one factor. People who missed the first one are interested in the, in the one coming up in May. But then also, because of this time of the year, because of tax season, tax refund season and so forth, that's one of the reasons it's been more of a rapid response, and we began to fill up some of the spaces quickly because people are receiving tax refunds, and the registration fee for our event is $200. That includes a copy of Patasa September, the book, OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood, OBAATAN, Afuraitkaitnut Womanhood, vegan meals for, breakfast and lunch for both days and so forth, as well as the tour of New Orleans that Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau, who's also presenting. She does a authentic cultural tour dealing with voodoo in New Orleans. Some of those tours in New Orleans, they just take you to little places and so forth and just talk some nonsense. But she's going to take us to these ancestral sites where ritual is taking place and so forth. So you have a real education. So the tour, the vegan meals, the 3 different books, the feast governs all of that. But because of the tax refund season, some people are able to utilize that. And we do have a payment plan option. You can pay $100 up front to reserve your space, and then, a couple of weeks later pay the second portion of the fee. So because we have that option, because it's tax refund season, this is why some of the spaces have been filling up kind of quickly. So we anticipate that we already have close to 10 people who have signed up. So within just a couple of weeks, we anticipate within the next few days that we'll have, the spaces filled. So because of those 2 factors, so if you would like to attend, simply go to the site. We just placed the link in the chat room. You can also look on our Kwesi on Facebook page, as well as Odwirafo on Facebook. We have a KA-KAIT, Soul of Hoodoo and Voodoo page specifically for the event, and we have an event notification, so you'll see that as well. We have a video on YouTube introducing it, so you can see all of the details there, including the itinerary and the nature of the conference, what it's about, or the retreat, what it's about, and so forth. So, again, Yedase, we thank everyone for tuning in to the broadcast, and Yebe Shabio, we will meet again. That's it.